Well, good morning, everybody. Want to welcome you. Thank you for spending a little bit of your Easter weekend with us. I want to welcome our other campuses right now, our Cottage Grove, our Hastings, our Eagan campus, our Woodbury campus. And those of you joining us right now live on our YouTube channel, welcome, welcome, welcome. Well, that song that you just heard, my guess is you've probably heard it before. It's from a hit motion picture called A Star is Born. And in that song, my good friends, Bradley and Stephanie, also known as Lady Gaga, they raise, I think, some very profound questions. I hope you weren't just caught up in the beauty of that harmony. I hope you were actually listening to the lyrics of that song, because there's some very, very deep questions. Questions like, are you happy in this modern world? Or do you need more? Questions like, is there something else you're searching for? And are you trying to fill that void? Again, the song is called Shallow, but there's absolutely nothing shallow about those questions right there. I think one of the reasons why this song resonates with so many of us, I think one of the reasons why this song on YouTube has had the following number of views: 448,880,186 views on YouTube, which is just slightly more than my last sermon, by the way, which had 186 views, just to let you know. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think the reason why so many people have viewed that song is because those are the questions that every generation asks. It doesn't matter if you're Gen Z or if you're the silent generation, the builders, the greatest generation, or somewhere in between. We ask those questions. And what Shallow is all about is calling us to get out of the shallows. It's calling us to go deeper in our lives. It's calling us to a deeper, more meaningful, more profound, more robust kind of a life. It's calling you and it's calling me to live a better story. And that is our theme this weekend, by the way, a better story. And I don't know if you've ever thought about your life as a story, but your life is a story and my life is a story. You're writing a paragraph or two or three just being here this Easter weekend at Crossroads. Our lives are a story. And I don't know if you've ever thought, again, of your life that way, but just think about your life right now as a story. And let me ask you this. What kind of a story are you right now living? What kind of a story are you living? Maybe you think, I'm living a comedy. Ha, ha, ha. My life is fun right now. Or maybe you're thinking, I'm living out an adventure. Or maybe you're thinking, nah, I'm living out a romance story right now. In fact, you maybe met somebody on the way into church and, you're sitting by them right now. Your heart's going pitter, pitter, patter. Just, keep your hands to yourself. And anyway, maybe your life, and I hope this isn't true, but maybe your life is a tragedy right now. Or maybe, and I hope this isn't true, maybe you're living out a horror story right now. But whatever your story is, my guess is if you're like me, you're probably thinking, depending on when you ask me, I'll tell you what kind of story I'm living out, because it vacillates a lot. It really does. But regardless of what kind of story you and I are living out right now, there's two things about your story and there's two things about my story that are true. And the first one is this: that our stories are still being formed. They're still being formed. It doesn't matter how young or how old you are. We are still writing out our life story, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter. We're still writing our life stories. You're writing your life story right now as we gather in this place. The other thing that's true about your story and my story is that our stories can be transformed. This is, by the way, the good news. Our stories can be transformed. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what you're going through right now. It doesn't matter what you're facing tomorrow. Your story and my story can be transformed. And I can say that because of what this weekend is all about. I can say that because of Easter. Because of Easter, what Easter says is nothing is final. Nothing is final. Crucifixions aren't final. There are resurrections to come. What Easter says is that hope is alive. Why? Because Jesus is alive. Because Jesus is alive, my life story and your life story can be altered. It can be transformed. It can be changed. And what we're going to do today, and we do this every weekend at Crossroads, we're going to go to the Bible. And I want to share with you a great story of transformation today. And it's found in the New Testament in a book called Luke. Now, why did the people who put the compiled the Bible. Why they call it Luke? Because the author's name is, yeah, this is a sharp group. Yeah, because the author's name is Luke. Yeah, he was one of the four people who wrote an account of the life and teachings of Jesus. And Luke, as you're turning to Luke 24, I invite you to do that. Luke chapter 24 is where we're going today. As you're turning there, opening up your Bible app or whatever you do, let me just say this. Luke was a first century physician. That's who Luke was. And he was tasked with writing a detailed and orderly account of the life of Jesus. And so Luke gives us this wonderful, wonderful story in Luke 24. But before we go there, I want to give you a little bit of the backstory. And the backstory is Luke 23. Because what's happening in Luke 23 is this. The Messiah, the would-be Messiah, the supposed Messiah, his name was Jesus, the Christ, has been executed. He has been crucified. And it all happened on a very, very bad Friday. And all of Jesus's followers, in fact, the entire city of Jerusalem saw it happening. Thousands of people, the followers of Jesus, they watched as Jesus was dragged away. They watched as he was falsely accused and tried. They watched as he was beaten to a pulp. And they watched as those Roman guards drove spikes in his wrists and in his feet. They watched him bleed. And they watched him slowly die on a cruel cross. They watched him as he breathed last breath. And then they watched the Roman guards drive a sword into his side just to make sure he truly was dead. And then they watched as Jesus was taken down off the cross and placed into a cave-like tomb. And then a big stone was rolled on top of that cave. They watched it all. And as we enter into this story in Luke 24, I want you to just feel a little bit about what these followers of Jesus are feeling. Because even though it's Sunday morning, for them, they're still stuck in Friday. Jesus is this thing that happened is on their minds. They bet the farm on Jesus, and now all their hopes and all their dreams have been shattered. And I want you to go there. I want you to feel just a little bit of what they were feeling. In fact, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go right now in your mind to the saddest, the most tragic, the most disappointing day of your entire life. And I know this is going to be very, very hard for some of you to do, but I want you to go there right now. What is the saddest, most tragic, most disappointing day that you have ever lived? What is that? Because that is exactly what these followers of Jesus are feeling. They're feeling that because their hope, their dreams have been shattered by what happened on Friday. Now there's rumors, it's Sunday morning now, and there's rumors that Jesus, his tomb is empty. And that's where we're gonna pick up the story, all right? Did I give you enough time to find Luke 24? All right, here we go. Luke 24, here it is, verse 13. That same day, two of Jesus's followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. Let's just stop right now. And we have to ask this question. Why the walk? Why did they walk out of the western gate of the wall around Jerusalem? And why are they walking now down this road toward a village called Emmaus? Why are they leaving Jerusalem and why are they going to Emmaus? And I think the same reason why you didn't want to stay in that day that I just had you think about. Your saddest, most tragic, most disappointing day. Nobody wants to stay there. You don't want to stay there in your mind. You don't want to stay there ever. You want to get away from that day, right? And I think that's why these two followers of Jesus are walking away from Jerusalem. They want to get away from it all. They don't want to be there any longer. Just like you and just like I don't want to be wherever that day is for me. Let's pick up the story. Look what happened. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. Of course they are. How could they not talk about what had happened? I mean, these guys, can't you just almost picture these two followers walking that road? Their feet are kind of shuffling. Their shoulders are like this, their head hanging down. And they're just saying, I can't believe this happened. We bet the farm on Jesus. We thought he was the Messiah. We thought he was the answer to all of our problems. We thought. I can't believe this happened. But it did. For them, everything good died on that Friday for them. And so check out what happens there. This is the next verse, verse 15. As they talked and discussed these things, talk about a plot twist, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. Whoa. Say what? We call that a plot twist. Yeah, all of a sudden, as they're walking, heads down, shoulder slump, there, all of a sudden, Jesus shows up. Now, keep in mind, they think Jesus is in a tomb. They saw him die. They saw the Roman guards plunge he didn't move. He was completely dead. They saw him buried. They saw this big stone rolled on top. They didn't think, there was no way. So in their minds, Jesus is in a tomb. And by the way, can I just say this? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four people who wrote about Jesus, none of these gospel writers record that Jesus's followers on Sunday morning showed up at the tomb thinking there was going to be a resurrection. They didn't show up, hey, let's do the Easter countdown now. Confetti in their hands, champagne chilling over here, right? No, they didn't. They weren't there. Hey, everybody, it's going to happen. Get ready. Let's go. Let's go. Countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Get the cameras ready. 4. He's about to come out of the grave. 3, 2. Woo! No one was there. No one was there. They weren't thinking that Jesus would come back from the dead. In fact, nobody expected nobody to walk out of the tomb. You want me to read that again? Because this little space makes a big difference. Nobody expected nobody to walk out of the tomb. And all of a sudden, here they are walking, and all of a sudden, Jesus shows up. And what I find to be fascinating is verse 16. Look at this. But God kept them from recognizing him. What? Yeah, somehow or another, God the Father kept these two followers from recognizing that Jesus was right there next to them. How he did it, I don't know. But for whatever reason, these two followers, Jesus is all of a sudden there and they don't recognize him. And so Jesus, I call him Stalker Jesus in this story. Stalker Jesus asked them, here's the next verse. He asked them, what are you two discussing so intently as you walk along? And this question just sort of stops them in their tracks. And they say, they stop short, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleo, I'm going to call him Cleo, Cleopas replied, you must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened there the last few days. In other words, Cleo's saying, I'll paraphrase, dude, how can you be so clueless? How in the world can you not know what just happened over here in Jerusalem? This is just maybe a little aside for all of you, but when the Romans crucified people, they did it very publicly. They would do it at the major crossroads of the city, oftentimes, because they wanted everybody to see that if you mess with Rome, this is what happens to you. You're going to end up on a tree, nailed to a cross. So it was inconceivable to these two followers of Jesus that this guy, whoever this guy was walking with them, had missed the whole stinking thing. They could not believe, dude, where have you been? How could you be so clueless? And then Jesus, of course, replies, well, what things? I love the playfulness here of Jesus. I wish I was there just to see how he did that. If he had to turn and kind of smile or something. He said, what things, he asked. And then they say, the things that happened to Jesus, the man from Nazareth, they said. Now, we're not going to read all of these verses of the story, but what they do then, what these two followers do when Jesus says what things, is they go on, you got to hear this, they go on to tell Jesus all about Jesus, not knowing that it was Jesus who was standing there with them. There's humor here, friends. There's humor. But what isn't very funny is what happens next in verse 21. We had hoped, this is what they say, we had hoped that he was the Messiah. And these three words right here that I highlighted for you, we had hoped, those are three words that are colored gray with disappointment. We had hoped. We had hoped. Yeah, we bet the farm on him. We thought he was the one. We had put all of our faith and all of our hope and all of our dreams, and we just put everything in him, and look what happened. And I don't know if you're here today and you're religious or you're irreligious, or you're a person who loves church, or you're a person who was dragged here and you absolutely hate church and you can't wait for this thing to be over. But wherever you find yourself today, what I know that's common for all of us is that all of us have had our we had hoped moments, right? All of us in our life stories have a chapter or two or three or four or more that are just all about disappointment. They're painted gray with words of disappointment. And I want to just ask you again to look at your story. I want you to just think about your story right now. And I want you simply, as you think about your story, I want you to answer this question. What is your I had hoped? What is yours? Think about that. As you think about your story, what is your I had hoped, I had hoped, I had hoped. I had hoped by now that I wouldn't be so lonely. I had hoped by now that my kids would have turned around. I had hoped by now that I wouldn't hurt so bad. I had hoped by now that my marriage would be more fulfilling. I had hoped that the anxiety would have lessened by now. I had hoped that the depression would have gone away. I had hoped that at this point in my life, I would have been happier. I had hoped. And what joins us together at all of our campuses is that we all have that I had hoped moment or two or three or more. And what happens next? And again, I wish we had time to look at this whole story in depth. What happens next is Jesus sort of takes over here. In fact, starting in verse 25, Jesus takes over and he begins to tell them the story. I mean, they're kind of clueless. They haven't put it all together. And so what Jesus does next is he starts connecting the dots. He starts telling them about what this Messiah was, how he came, how he had to die, be raised for their sins so that their relationship with God could be restored. He just puts it all together. And as he's putting it all together, they've made their way the 7-mile journey to this little dusty town called Emmaus. It's probably been what? I don't know. How long does it take you to walk 2 miles? For me, it's about, 7 miles. For me, it's about, 2 days. But maybe you can walk faster. Maybe it's been a couple hours. But as they get closer to Emmaus, as Jesus is putting it all together, and giving them the story, what Luke records is that something begins to stir. Something begins to stir in their hearts. They're feeling something. Like they don't even know what it is, but they're feeling something in their heart. But not only are their hearts stirring, their stomachs are growling. They're hungry. And so they get to Emmaus and they sit down and they start breaking bread. And again, something is going on in these two followers. They don't know what it is. And maybe they're going back. Maybe as Jesus is breaking bread with them, maybe they're reflecting back on the fact that Jesus broke bread, blessed it, and he fed a multitude of people, thousands of people. Or maybe they're going back to that upper room moment where Jesus and his followers broke bread and shared the cup. And Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. Maybe they're going there. I don't know what's going on here, but there's something going on. There's something stirring in their hearts as they're breaking bread. In verse 31, Luke records this. Verse 31, suddenly, look at this. Suddenly, their eyes were opened. Their eyes are opened and they recognized him. For the very first time, the light bulb goes on. For the very, very first time, they have an aha moment. And for the very first time, they know that the stranger that walked with them to this village called Emmaus was none other than Jesus himself. That Jesus is alive. He's alive. And what was it that opened their minds? You know what it was, I think? Here's what I think it was. I think when Jesus broke the bread and did this, I think right there, they saw the nail prints in his wrist. I think it was right there that they realized that this stranger was none other than Jesus, and he was and is alive. And from that moment on, those two followers' lives were forever changed. From that moment on, their story that had gone from this wonderful adventure to this horror story all of a sudden became an adventure story again. You see, friends, when Jesus enters your story, you're forever changed. And it's interesting that Jesus shows up and their stories are forever changed. And then Luke records that just like that, just as Jesus appeared, guess what happens? He disappears. Just like that, he's gone. They don't know where he went, but he's gone. And so guess what these disciples do? Guess what these followers do? Jesus is gone. Guess what they do? They lace up their Nikes, they put their Fitbit on, and they run back to Jerusalem because they've got a story to tell, because their stories have been forever changed. And I want to get back to what I just said just a moment ago, that when Jesus enters our story, our stories are forever changed. I want to get back to that. But first of all, I want to take a step back, and I just want to ask you, what just happened here? I mean, what just happened here? It's Sunday morning, and what has Jesus just done? What has he just done? And here's the answer. He pulled off the miracle of all miracles. He, in front of thousands of people, he predicted his death and his resurrection, and he pulled it off. Against great odds, against all odds, he pulled it off. He pulled it off. And I want you right now to put yourself in Jesus's Birkenstocks, his sandals. He wore Birkenstocks. I want you to think right now, if you were Jesus and you just pulled off the miracle of all miracles, the greatest miracle in the history of the world, what would you do? It's Sunday morning, you just did it. What would you do? What would you do if you were Jesus? What would I do if I were Jesus? I would call every news channel, every media outlet together. I would gather everybody into the square in Jerusalem, and I would get the biggest sound system I could rent, and I would gather everybody together, and I would say three words, and here they are right here. Told you so. I told you so. In fact, if it was me, I would add a fourth word. Told you so, suckers. That's what I would add. Told you so, suckers. That's just me. That's not Jesus. Thankful that I'm not Jesus. Yeah, I know. But that's what I would say. But let me ask you this. Is that what Jesus did? No, not even close. What does Jesus do? Interesting. He doesn't stay in Jerusalem where all the crowds and all the throngs of people are at. He doesn't gather everybody together, all the religious leaders and all the people, all the naysayers and all the doubters and all the, what. No, he doesn't gather them together and say, told you so. What does he do? What does he do? What does he do? You got to get this. He turns his back on the crowds, on the throngs, and what does he do? He walks down a little road with two obscure followers of his toward an obscure little town, little dusty village called Emmaus. He takes a walk. He takes a walk with two people that we don't know anything about to a town that in a row we can't even find anymore. I mean, Jesus, what in the world are you doing? Why did he take a walk with two disheartened followers? And friends, you got to hear this. What was it all about? Why did he do it? And the answer is this. He did it for you. He did it for me. Because he wanted us to know something. He wanted us to know that he is with us on our Emmaus road. That he's with us, just like he was with these two unnamed, obscure people. He is with you and he was with me along every delay of life, on every detour, at every apparent dead end on our journey. He is with us. Why? Why is he with us? Even when we can't see him and when we don't know he's there, why is he with us? And it's because you matter to him. It's because you matter to him. And I believe that God brought some of you into one of our spaces and places that you're watching live right now because you need to hear this, that you matter to God. You matter to Jesus. You matter to Jesus. Even if he doesn't matter to you, you matter to him. And if you'll just stop, and if you'll just look, and if you'll just listen, I believe that Jesus will become as alive to you as he became to those two followers on the road to Emmaus. I believe that. And I believe that if you'll just stop and look and listen, if you'll just let him, Jesus, who is alive, into your life and into your story, I believe that your story will be forever changed. That, my friends, is the message of Easter. And I want you to think about that. I want you to think about where this Jesus is in your life as you watch this together.
As I reflect on the experiences that shaped my life, I see my story through my childhood years. I was one of 6 children in a household of 9, including my grandmother. I was introverted, shy, and easily influenced by those around me. I was desperate for attention and believed that if I could just mimic the adults, I would go unnoticed. Unfortunately, their behaviors were not always healthy for me or them. For generations, my family and family friends struggled with addictions. My parents and their friends often drank to excess, and we always had alcohol in our home. I was learning that when adults drank, they had friends, laughs, and great times. I can vividly remember serving drinks at my parents' parties. I tried alcohol for the first time when I was between 6 and 8 years old. Living out in the country, I only had a few neighbors my age. Most of my friends were older, and they also introduced me to many things that were not appropriate for an elementary school student. I know now that they were abusing me and taking advantage of my vulnerability. When I was 10, our family moved, and I began to look for new ways to fit in. I was an athlete, musician, engaged in just about every other activity available. By society standards, I was doing well. At age 13, I discovered the key to popularity for me, being a party animal. When I drank, everyone thought I was funny and wanted to hang out with me. I was popular. I felt invincible. On the inside, I was struggling with a sense of inadequacy, a lack of self-worth, and low self-esteem. By the time I was in my mid to late 20s, I could no longer hide or pretend that I wasn't a full-blown alcoholic. Often I would pass out and not know where I was or where I had been the night before. I had a tough time waking up for work or getting anywhere on time. Deep down, I knew that I had a problem and I needed to do something about it. One of my best friends had been drinking, passed out on the highway, and killed himself and 6 others. That event hit me hard and reminded me of the lives that were being ruined by drug use and addiction. God had put some of the most unlikely people and events in my life to encourage that change. God had also put Brenda in my life. We got married in our mid-20s, and it became evident to me that alcoholism would not be conducive to a happy marriage. We dated for several years and had been married for a while when I felt we had come to a fork in the road. I suspected that our marriage was at risk. That was scary. I couldn't handle being a failure in anything, especially marriage. Losing her would have been devastating. It was my dream to have a family, but I couldn't imagine raising children as an alcoholic. Around that same time, I remember hearing an alcoholic teenager on TV say that she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. That resonated with me. The next day, I told Brenda that I had had my last drink, and I haven't touched alcohol since. That was nearly 30 years ago. Much later, I realized I was not alone, and I never would have had the courage to give up everything I knew without Jesus. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus yet at that time. In fact, I had completely given up on him and myself. The true beauty of that day was that Jesus had not given up on me. He wanted a better life for me. He knew that I wanted a good marriage and children who wouldn't be negatively influenced by my addiction. I did develop a personal relationship with Jesus years later, but I will always credit my decision to take the narrow path that day with my walk since. My life has changed so much since that last drink. Sometimes I feel a sense of guilt and loss for wasting a large portion of my life as an addict. I don't always know who my story is affecting or how my life is affecting them, but I do believe that my story has had an impact on many others. It is hard to express how much better my life has been since I began to follow Jesus. I am far from perfect, but through his grace, I have been able to constantly strive to be a better person, husband, parent, servant, and example to those around me. My hope always is that what Christ has done in my life will be my legacy for future generations.
My dad is the most supportive person that I know. He is a man that lives his life with great integrity and character. He's a man that leads me and my family so well.
My dad is selfless. He gives so much of his time and energy to serve and care for the people around him, and is always thinking about how to make others' lives better.
What I love about that story is that long before Jesus mattered to Randy, Randy mattered to Jesus. And the entire time, Randy didn't know, but Jesus was walking alongside of him. That Jesus was working on his story long before he recognized it. And the good news is that Jesus did not abandon Randy. And the good news for you and I is that he doesn't abandon us either, because we matter to him. And this Jesus, he invites us and enables us to live a better story. That's what he calls us to live a story that echoes into the future, that has generational change for our kids and our kids' kids. Then the good news that what Phil shared with us is that your story, it's still being formed, but the better news is that our stories can be transformed, and that is exactly what Jesus is best at. So I wonder, this Easter 2019, what's the next paragraph and sentence going to say in your story? What's the next chapter look like? Because it's being written right now, and you need to know it's being written by you.
Yeah, if you think about it, when you leave here today, there's really two potential storylines. The first maybe is, I went to Crossroads Easter 2019, and I stayed awake through most of it. Not bad, had a couple laughs, and when I was there, I felt like this tugging in my heart. But I've already made up my mind to this whole Jesus and church, this religious stuff, that it's just not for me. Or maybe, I felt this tugging in my heart, but I'm just not at the point. I just don't want to even think about it. I'm just going to push it aside. So maybe I'll come back for Christmas, and they'll tell me Merry Christmas. Or maybe I won't. The other potential story is I went to Crossroads for Easter 2019. It was hard to get some parking in, but it was fine. I walked into the service and #interesting. Wasn't expecting Johnny Cash and golf carts, but when I was there's something that was just stirring in my heart. And maybe for the first time, I had this light bulb moment that maybe there's something to this Jesus thing. Maybe Jesus is real. Maybe God actually knows me. Maybe in the midst of my pain and my doubts and my mess and my frustrations, and my questions, maybe God really does love me. And maybe God really wants a relationship with me. And so I decided that if Jesus makes me better at life, then maybe I'm going to give this Jesus thing a shot. So at Easter 2019 at Crossroads, I decided to take my first step of faith by just saying yes to Jesus. I don't have all the answers and still have some questions, but I'm going to decide to start that journey of faith and that relationship with Jesus. My question is what is your story going to be as you leave today?
And it's the Jesus that John is talking about. And the good news is that it's the Jesus that rose from the grave 2,000 years ago wants to walk with you today.
Yeah.
That the Jesus that was walking with the two on the road to Emmaus wants to be walking with you this very same day in this very same moment. That he wants to be in step with you. The question is, will you take a next step with him? In fact, what we've done as a church is that we've created a resource to help you take a next step, to help you walk along over the next 7 days. And we've titled it the 7-Day Journey. And the way you can be a part of it is that all you can do, and I'd even encourage you can pull your phone out and you can text 7 days to 55588. And every single day over the next week, you're going to get a 3 to 4 minute teaching about Jesus from our lead pastor, who's an incredible teacher of God's word. He's in a highlight moment where you're going to see Jesus doing what only he can do. And by the end of this journey, our prayer is that you would see and know Jesus in a brand new way.
Yeah, and I would just say this. Take the step. I mean, what do you have to lose? And it's of my opinion that you have everything to gain. You see, because I know this personally. I have a relationship with Jesus. I've taken a step, and it's not always easy. I don't have all the answers. You might have a lot of questions that I don't know how to answer. But I can tell you this, is that Jesus has completely transformed and changed my life. And you might be like, you're a pastor. You're paid to say that. But I'll say this. When I was a high schooler, my dad, who had been burnt by the church, just wanted nothing to do with it. When I was in high school, my dad had a tugging on his heart. And my dad decided to say yes to Jesus. And I saw God transform my dad in front of my eyes. My dad was never the same. And I'm telling you, since I've been a pastor, I've seen God do this many times. And it just starts with a simple, I'm just going to say yes to Jesus. And so across this place, in the cafe and in this room, I'm going to give you a start. If you want to start this journey, or maybe you've been gone for a long time and you say, you know what, I want to get back on this. I want to start following Jesus again. I'm just going to pray a prayer and let you repeat after me. It's a very short prayer. So if you would just bow your head, and if you would like to go on this journey of following Jesus, would you just repeat this after me, just in your heart? Jesus, today, I say yes to you. Today, I say yes to a start of a journey of following you. Please help me in this. In Jesus' name, amen.
And I just want to say, if you prayed that prayer, that's the best step you could have ever taken in your life, that there's a party going on in heaven for you because you chose to take that step. And I'm so excited for you, and I love to celebrate with you. And I just want to say for all of us, thank you for taking this step to celebrate here at Easter at Crossroads 2019. It has been a blast being together, being on a journey together, and seeing how God can change our lives now and forevermore. And I just want to say this as well. We're a church that loves to support you. In fact, right now, is there something stirring in your life? Our prayer team will be up here. They'd love to pray with you. Whatever's going on in your life, we want to be here to walk along with you and support you. If you don't need that, please hear from my heart, our heart. We'd love for you back here next week for our For the Next series. You're not going to want to miss a moment of it. We believe God's all over it, and he has something for us in this series. And one last time, from us to you, happy Easter. It's been a blast. We love you. We love you. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back next weekend for the next. Love you all.